Hey everybody, welcome back. We've got an interesting video today, hopefully an educational video today, where we are going to talk about what I do to specifically prepare my colonies for the winter. Now, I was inspired by my buddy Dave, who recently put out a video on how he prepares his hives for overwintering. Yes, Dave, I'm wearing my hat backwards, and yes, you will be okay. It's a running joke we have. So anyway, I invite you all to go check out his channel, Hansberry Honeybees, and check out his recent video on how he prepares his colonies for winter. He runs singles with a super throughout the wintertime, whereas I do things a little bit differently in terms of just a single. And so I want to take you through all that so you can see exactly how I prepare these colonies for the wintertime. Before I dive into that, I guess I want to give you a little bit of update with what I've been working on, what I've been doing. I posted last week an update on how the colonies are doing. I've got 24 colonies. They're all seem to be doing fantastic. They're all queen right, good laying patterns. They appear to be quite healthy, good brood patterns. I've been feeding them like crazy. I think I've gone through about 800 or 900 pounds of sugar this fall, just to get those colonies up to weight. Again, ideally, when you overwinter singles, everything, the brood box, bottom, inner cover, outer cover, the bees, the colony, the frames, and the food that's going to take them through the wintertime, I target a weight around 70 pounds, roughly 70. It's not an exact science. I don't need for it to be an exact science. I just need those colonies to have enough food to get them through wintertime. So, been doing a lot of feeding with a lot of sugar syrup. Switched over to 2-to-1 beginning this month. It's October 19th. It's a cold, dreary day out here in Kentucky, so you can definitely tell it's fall time, winter is coming, and Halloween is right around the corner. This is the type of weather that we get here this time of year. So anyway, been doing a ton of feeding, the heavy syrup, 2-to-1, really trying to get those colonies up to weight. Been using this luggage scale that I have. I haven't done weighing hives video yet. I will get to that pretty soon. It's one of the last steps that I do just to try to make sure each colony is very close to that 70-pound total all-in target weight. Been doing a lot of oxalic acid vaporization treatments using my handy-dandy Oxalica vaporizer here that I got last year. I've really been loving this thing. Been using it quite a bit. It works really well. I love how you can change this little molded plastic on the bottom in terms of which batteries you may have around your house, whether you're a Milwaukee guy, DeWalt lady, whatever it may be. But been using this, been treating the colonies about every 7 days, just shooting them from behind here. No, the colonies are far from broodless. No, oxalic acid vaporization does not penetrate capped brood, but any level of knockdown is a good thing, especially this time of year when those fat bees are in the colony and all the preparations are being made to get the colony through the wintertime. Your bees need to be healthy. You need to get those dispersal mites dead. And so I think I've seen estimates that you can get close to 20% of the mites in a colony using oxalic acid this time of year. So I just keep hitting them every 6 or 7 days. Really got to get those mites low. Excuse me. Really got to get those mites low going into the wintertime. And so that's a primary focus as well. So feeding syrup, treating with oxalic acid. That's really what I've been doing the past month and a half. Feeding and treating to really get these colonies ready. So how do I overwinter my colonies here in Kentucky in the United States? Well, I overwinter singles. Now, big surprise and shock, right? What are some pros and cons to that? And what are some pros and cons to overwintering doubles or a single and a super or triples or what have you, right? Well, number one, you're taking less bees, in theory, you're taking less bees into the winter. A single brood chamber, you know, that cluster is likely going to be smaller than if you had a double or a triple, right? So that means, you know, less bees to have to feed, however, less room and area to store that food, right? So that is one of the major cons to overwintering, and I'll go ahead and start taking some of this off, to overwintering singles, is there's not as much room in here to store food. for the bees, period, right? If you had a double or a triple, that's a lot more room for those bees to be storing their food. Otherwise, they got to get it all through here in 10 frames, and that's it. Now, I do have these Apame pollen traps, which I just did a review video on that. I do put, not the pollen collector, but I do put the IPM board, insert tray, whatever you want to call it for the wintertime. Yes, you want to make sure that you put that in when you're overwintering your bees. The reason is this is now a screened or open bottom board, right? And when you put this in there, it seals it off. So any cold drafts or winter air, it's not going to creep in here as easily as if you just left it wide open, right? And now having these slatted racks creates a little bit of an air gap as well. So hopefully the queen, and she does lay throughout the winter, although it's very small, and there may be times where she completely shuts down. But you want her to be able to lay at the bottom of those frames, and she may tend to avoid it if it's cold down there. So anyway, this is it. This is where all your bees and all of your brood and food is going to be throughout the wintertime. So, you know, whether they tend to cluster in the middle here, off to one side, that's up to them. Generally, and it's wherever the food is, they're going to end up clustering close to that, right? Or wherever, actually, they're going to be on top of the brood, whatever little brood there is, because they have to maintain that 95 degrees throughout the entire wintertime. And our winters here in Kentucky are not brutal. They can get down to the single digits. They've been known to dip below 0, although generally it's not an extended period when that happens. We can get some pretty windy days, but generally speaking, the cold temperatures hit towards the end of October, beginning in November, and then they really somewhat subside in February going into March. You know, those are our kind of normal freezing months where temperatures would be below freezing. And bees cluster at temperatures below 58 degrees Fahrenheit. So what do we do here? So one of the things I was just mentioning is making sure that these colonies are up to weight. So I went through every colony, inspected, went ahead and checked to make sure that visually they have enough food. I kept feeding, and then assessed the queen right status, making sure it looked good in size, didn't need to do any combines. If a colony was weak, if it showed sign of disease like deformed wing virus or anything else you can visually inspect, you would want to go ahead and combine at that time. There's an old saying, take your losses in the fall instead of in the spring, right? So thankfully, I think I only had to do one combine, but I have all 24 colonies appear to be doing fine. I'm not going to say all 24 are going to make it out of winter, but that is certainly my goal. That is what I hope to accomplish this year. Dead mites and good nutrition is the best recipe at getting your bees through the winter. So one of the advantages of overwintering singles is that, you know, a lot of people will use quilt boards to put on top of their brood chambers, and that's what this is. This is a Vivaldi board. If you have not seen my video I did a few years ago called The Amazing Vivaldi Board, I recommend you check it out. I'll probably try to put links to all of this stuff down in the description just to kind of help you out so you can click and follow on those. But this is it's a quilt box. It does many other things, but for this winter, it's going to be a quilt box. And you can see that they provide an upper entrance here, just like you would have on that little slit with an inner cover. But yeah, this Vivaldi board sits right on top of the brood chamber. And I use Hive Alive patties. This is not a official product endorsement. I paid for 100% of the patties that you have seen in all of my videos. Nothing was sent to me. I'm just a fan of this stuff. I think it does help the bees stay healthy. The Irish seaweed that's in it, there's thyme in it to keep the sugar from going bad. There's all sorts of essential oils and goody good stuff, lemongrass oil and other things that bees seem to like. And I just think it works. And so I prophylactically feed every one of my colonies all winter long. Hive Alive has these 2.2 pound or 2 pound 4 ounce thinner patties, or they have these big fat 5 pound ones. And I prefer the 5 pound ones just because that's less that I have to check on the colonies. And just, this is like an insurance policy is the way I look at it. If the colony has enough honey to last them throughout the wintertime, they'll use it. Great. They won't touch this. I've had colonies go through an entire winter and not touch this patty. But if they do need it, it's right there. It's an emergency feed, and this is very cheap insurance. So I recommend feeding prophylactically. Your mileage may vary. Maybe you don't. You know, some people use the sugar with the mountain camp, you know, put a little bit of water in it and stuff. There's all sorts of ways to feed. But this Vivaldi board makes it easy where it's got that opening on top. And guess what, folks? That's the advantage of the single. This opening is right on top of the frames, right in the middle of the brood chamber. This is the only place the bees can be. They can't be anywhere else, right? And so they're going to be very close to this food, and they can move towards it as long as temperatures allow them to, and they're close to here, they're not going to starve, okay? Now, if they're way over here on frame 1 and 2, there's no food in between, are they going to crawl across there to get to this? No, they're going to starve and they're going to die. But again, that's also one of the reasons why when I was recently doing my final inspections, if I did see sort of a cluster off on frames like, say, 1 to like 7 or 8, I shifted those down 1 or 2 frames and took an empty frame and made sure frames 1 and 10 were empty, what have you. So just trying to centralize that cluster a little bit going into the winter because of how I specifically overwinter and what my setup is. Now, if you imagine another deep on top of here, and then you would put your Vivaldi board on top of that second deep, what if the colony is clustered down here in the wintertime? There's no food here. They've already eaten it all and moved down here. And then you've got your patty up here for the emergency food stores, but the cluster's down here. They're not going to climb up across an entire brood chamber if it's cold enough outside to go get that food. They will not abandon the brood and allow it to be chilled and die. They won't do it. They will die themselves before they will abandon that brood. So that's an advantage of overwintering with singles, and why a lot of your experts out there, you know, like the Bob Binnies and the, you know, other folks that you may watch on YouTube, they will tell you, generally speaking, it's easier to overwinter in singles because of that exact reason. But again, it's not a perfect method. There's less room in there. This time of year, when you are preparing to overwinter singles, you have to micromanage your colonies. You have to. You have to keep an eye on them. Because that queen right now has been and is laying the fat bees that she needs to overwinter with that have the extra fat deposits. And if you get a fall flow around here, we had a little bit of goldenrod coming in. You could just smell the dirty socks. I mean, if you have a really good nectar flow or you're feeding and the queen is trying to lay and there's only 10 frames for all of that to happen, the brood nest can start getting plugged, which I want to be very clear. The brood nest should be getting backfilled with nectar or sugar syrup this time of year. So if you pull out a frame, you look at it and you see, oh boy, and you see like, you know, that oval shaped brood pattern, and you see what looks like nectar or sugar syrup scattered throughout the brood, which means that the bees are backfilling emerging bees with sugar syrup or nectar. Don't panic. Don't, oh, they need more room. This is terrible. They're going to swarm on me in October. No, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They are supposed to be backfilling quite a bit of the brood with nectar and sugar syrup. Not 100% of the brood, but quite a bit of it because that population is on the decline. So that's not a bad thing. But what is a bad thing is if they literally did run out of room and you had one of those insane October, November swarms that doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of making it through the wintertime, and you've got a queenless colony left behind that has no chance of a virgin queen getting mated, and it's just like, it's sad. It's almost like a total loss. Like both colonies, neither one probably has a good chance of survival without beekeeper intervention. So, you know, certainly that is an advantage of the single, is having the food right there, less likelihood of starvation. But the downside being it's easier to plug this thing up and you could have one of those real late season swarms. To my knowledge, I did not have any late season swarms this year so far. You know, I've been micromanaging them. I've been opening the colonies and checking how much are they plugged. I have a couple colonies that have more bees in it than I would like right now. It's absolutely jam-packed, and I am afraid that they're flirting on the verge of a very late swarm, but so far they haven't. I keep checking them. They seem fine, doing really healthy going into the winter, so I'm just going to leave them be. Very healthy, very heavy as well. The total colony has good weight on it, so we're just going to leave them be. But I do have a Vivaldi board on 22 of the colonies, the only 2 being the license that, you know, because of the design, the polystyrene wouldn't accept a Vivaldi board. For those 2, I plan to convert the top hive feeder that's been feeding sugar syrup, fill it with pine chips and insulation that way, and turn that into the quilt box because it's made out of styrofoam anyway. It's got good insulative properties, so I think that'll get them through the winter. But we'll see. I don't know. I've never used polystyrene hives. I've never overwintered them, so we're gonna see how they work compared to the wooden colonies. So, okay, so let's get into more details about specifically what I do. So I've established that I run singles, that there's pros and cons to that. Those of you that are interested, I recommend you experiment yourself. Run your own studies. Your mileage may vary. You may love it. You may hate it. And guess what? Both is fine. You do what you want to do, and however you find success overwintering your bees, that's what's important, not how one person in particular does it. So imagine 10 frames in here, lots of bees, lots of food. The quilt box goes on top of that. Now you'll notice these Vivaldi boards have a little bit of an inset here. It's not a perfectly flat bottom. And the reason why is so that can observe the proper bee spacing, because the frames are going to be close to the top of this, and you need to have enough room for bees to crawl over the top of frames. Otherwise, you're going to get an unholy mess on your hand. And when you try to pull this off the top of a brood chamber, you're going to get 20 streaks of propolis where they've glued all 10 of those frames in to the top of this box, the bottom of this box, the top of their hive, to seal those things in, and it's a pain to get it out, okay? Well, the creator of this knew that, so they observed the proper bee spacing to allow a gap here so bees can crawl over the top of the frames. So it goes on top just like this. This is a 24/7 quilt box. You can use this during the spring and summer. I do not, personal preference, but there's lots of YouTube videos out there where people use these all year round. I take mine off in the wintertime and put them, in the spring, and put them back on in the fall. I've experimented with different forms of insulated material inside this quilt box. My very first year, I used pine shavings. It was fine. Second, third, is this my 4th winter? Going into my 5th winter, I think. 4th winter, second and third winter, sorry, I used burlap. You may have seen some of those videos where I put it over a sugar brick in here. And then last year, I started using this foam board right here. And so this is 2-inch foam board. Now, the Vivaldi board comes with a shim like this, but it is not this one, and it is smaller than this one. The reason I know is because I have a bunch of those, and it's great for feeding your own custom-made sugar bricks, but I wanted to be able to feed those Hive Alive patties, so I made 20 plus of these custom-made shims with the number 8 hard wire cloth, and I think this is maybe 1.5 or just pine wood is all it is. It's a little shim that fits on top of the Vivaldi board just like that, okay? And you probably guessed it. It is built such that a Hive Alive patty fits right inside there. And so I wanted to be able to feed these Hive Alive patties, but also in case, bees certainly find a way of getting outside of the plastic, I didn't want to have them all up in here, so I put the screen on it. Is it absolutely necessary? Probably not, but I went ahead and just did it out of precaution. And then I took this 2-inch foam board, and I'm laughing because my type A OCD won this battle. I knew what I was doing was inefficient and wasteful by being obsessed with this wanting it to be unibodied. Okay? Because doesn't that just look cool? Come on. That's pretty, I don't know. Doesn't that, like this YouTuber I used to watch, he said, doesn't that just give you the fizz? Uh, I guess giving you the fizz and expression where you just think something's just neat, fits together just right, looks great, just like you pictured, designed. It gives you the fizz. So anyway, I was throwing all this away. Yes. Boo, hiss. Bad Josh. How wasteful. Shame on you. Shame. Okay, so we've established that. So I have several just like these, but I thought, you know what? I need a few more. Let's not be wasteful. Let's be smart and efficient here. And so I cut out custom. So these will fit, and you got to wedge them in there, but you get the idea. These will fit and do just as good a job as my unibody design that was completely unnecessary from the beginning. But I digress. Like I said, my OCD won in the beginning, but thankfully I fought it, and now I'm gonna be more efficient. So anyway, so that goes in. So for the sake of the rest of this video, we're gonna use the unibody one. Okay, so that goes in there like that. You've got your pollen patty underneath here. I don't know if it's really critical that I get it in there, but you get the idea. Okay, pollen patty. I'm gonna, for the sake of our rest of this demonstration, I'm gonna move this off to the side just so you can see a little better, or maybe so I can see a little better. Okay, so the next thing that I do is I take a layer of this Reflectix material, and this has very minor R value. It may not even be 1.5, I don't know, but it does reflect heat off because of the silver. I'm not sure if this is foil. I assume it's foil. But I just push that on top of the shim and the foam board. And that foam board, 2 inches thick here, I want to say it has an R value of like 7 to 10, something like that, maybe closer to 10 for the 2 inches. And oh boy, what is the R value that you need to prevent the condensation of the bee's breath from condensing on the ceiling in the hive? Somebody, Google or AI fact check me, but I want to say it's like an R5. As long as it's an R5 or higher, the ceiling temperature of the hive will be warmer than the sides. And so the breath from them exhaling will condense on the sides of the hive instead of dangerously above their head to where it could drip on them and kill them. So this is plenty of R value for that. Now, let's go ahead and just real quick go on a tangent here and talk about insulation, period. Whether you should insulate your hives or not. We could dedicate hours to this discussion. And it largely varies on where your hives are in the world. Where are you located? What is your weather patterns like? It is my sister, and I will call her back. Okay, so what are your weather patterns like? How much R value do you need? Are you in the Arctic? Is it freezing cold? Or do you live in Miami, Florida, where it never gets cold and you probably don't even overwinter your bees? I don't know. What's that like? Or in Africa, maybe. So it really does depend on the weather patterns for the most part. Now, do I know beekeepers here in Kentucky that overwinter with zero insulation and their bees survive and live? Yeah, I do. Do I have fellow beekeeper friends here in Kentucky that insulate the living snot out of their hives all winter long and they survive and they live? Yeah. Have both experienced losses? Yeah, because mites don't really care about the insulation. My point is, I don't think there's one right or wrong answer. I was in the camp of, we do too much. We're doing, you're doing too much, Josh. You're doing too much. You don't need that much insulation. It's a waste of money. Blah, 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 blah. Bees will live. They'll be fine, etc. Okay. Yes, that can and is true sometimes. But it doesn't mean that both hives come out of the winter at the same level. If the criteria is did they live or not, that's a pretty low bar, in my opinion, right? But I was there. I was kind of like, hey, they lived. Okay, they're fine. They can handle the cold. What's the big deal about? And then I listened to a podcast, and I'll try to remember to put a link in the description, on Two Bees in a Podcast, where they had, I think he was an engineer who was an expert on insulation and also honeybees, and just completely changed my mind about the advantages of insulation, not just through the winter, but all year round, comparing it to the natural cavity of a tree, which would be a natural habitat for feral bees. But I was like, wow, yeah, I think I'm converted. And one of the, I think, reasons that it helps is your bees have to consume less food stores because they're having to generate less heat because it's a more efficient hive, and they're able to keep it warmer with exerting less energy. So bees could end up living longer if you have these longer winters on less food because they're not having to exert as much energy, whereas it could have been the difference between you losing a colony or not. You know, so that's one reason. But I'm not gonna chastise you one way or the other because I get it. But this year, I am going to add some wrap for the first time ever around my colony, so we'll see how that works. So here is the Reflectix, and then the final step, I think this is a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4 inch foam board. And it's the perfect height to settle down in there and really give it a good seal. Boom. Okay? Ain't nothing getting in and out of there. All right? That's pretty airtight. Now, with that being said, you see the vent holes here. Nothing's venting. So that's another thing. If you've been watching my channel, you know that I've had some form of ventilation through the wintertime. I think there's different theories on that. I've heard people say, oh, you got to ventilate. And I've heard others say, trees aren't ventilated. You don't ventilate. I've heard both arguments. Are they both right? Probably. Are they both wrong? Probably. Is it situationally dependent? Probably. But I used to ventilate, and now I'm not going to. So I am going to cover these entrances all winter long. Half my colonies propolized them anyway last year. And there's no air flowing through here either because I've got that foam board in the way, and whereas historically I would have burlap and air would be able to pass through. That's just what I'm doing. So not going to ventilate. And there's enough R factor here combined. I don't know what the total R value is. I didn't add it up. But there's enough here to where most of the condensation should be on the side walls of the colony. So that's it. Just like this. You guessed it. Inner cover next. Oh, yeah. I was like, wait a minute. Is that right? You don't have to use the inner cover, but I generally keep them on there. And then outer cover. That's it. Put a brick on top, and this colony would be ready for winter. Though, one thing I didn't mention yet is I do close. That's what's so nice about these Apame bottom boards. I mean, they're so versatile. You could have half open here. What if you wanted a nuke here and a nuke here? You could have two separate entrances further away from each other. But then you close this. I keep this closed. And in the wintertime, actually, technically almost all year round, I leave it down to just 3 entrances there. So real small entrance. You know, yes, can wind get through here a little bit? Absolutely. But that's where I think this slatted rack allegedly helps. And so anyway, I would close these down for the wintertime to just a very small opening. And then their tray out here has slits in it, so when snow falls on it and then it melts, the water falls through and it doesn't clog up the entrance. So this is it. So multiply this times 22, and that is how I intend and plan to overwinter all of my colonies. It's pretty straightforward. It's worked very well for me in the past. I've been using these Vivaldi boards since day one. And I really like them. My friend Laura Wilson turned me on to them. Oh, that was like a Blake Hardy moment, wasn't it? Coffee time with Blake. Anyway, and then throughout the winter time, what I will do is, you gotta be a little careful here, right? It's easy to tear this stuff up, and there's actually like some hardware cloth in here, but you pull this out, take your Reflectix off, and you'll be able to visually inspect and see this Hive Alive is upside down, but you look at the bottom here, and you'll be able to see how much of the bee's been eating, how much food's left, right? Et cetera, and then you put your, you know, if you need to, you can pull that out. You can put a new patty in there. If you don't, you just close this right back up, right? And that's it. Put your lid back on. Now, like I mentioned before, for the first time, I am going to use a wrap. So, Man Lake graciously sent me these. They sent me 10 of these. They're called the Bee Cozy wrap. And I want to say they retail for $40-ish, maybe. I've never used these before. I think they're going to work great. I think does it say what the R, this is for a 10 frame. They make them different sizes. I want to say it adds like, is it like a R10? Dave will correct me, trust me. I'm not sure exactly, but obviously it adds something. And the way that they tell you to stick it on here is that it just slides over top. And so we're going to test one here. Oh, yeah. And they tell you to put the seam in the front. I don't know why, but I'm going to follow directions. And they advertise it as for a deep and a super. Well, it's essentially what I have here with the Vivaldi board. So I may have to figure out a way to ensure that their entrance doesn't get covered here. Maybe I bobby pin that up or something. I don't know. Just thinking out loud. Those of you that have used these before, I'm all ears for suggestions. How do you make sure that your bees don't get trapped if this thing slides down? But yeah, I mean, that's about as simple as it gets, right? Make sure because I could just see me knocking this coffee off on the floor like an idiot, rotating this and not remembering it was sitting there. Okay, but look at that. I mean, pretty simple, right? And you know, don't be worried that it's not all the way up here, right? This is insulation, right? So as long as it's covering all the orange, that's where you need to have the added insulated material, right? Is making sure that you don't see anything that's orange. Yeah, I like that. That's pretty easy. I'd like to find a way to maybe keep it somehow. Maybe I use Gorilla Tape. I don't know. I'm going to have to experiment with that. Like I said, first year for me using this, but I'm a believer. Listen to that. I'm telling you guys, listen to that podcast. If you don't subscribe to Two Bees in a Podcast, you probably should. It's a really nice, really good podcast. Ooh. But I'm telling you, that dude made an obscene amount of sense. I moved the box. That's what I did. And I was like, wow, he's completely changed my opinion on insulation. And yeah, I'd like to find a way maybe to keep it up like that. I think that would be perfect. All right, make sure that there's enough space there. Well, I don't know. Boy, it's a little concerning. Like I said, I'm going to have to pin this up or something. Maybe use a staple there or something just to make sure that that stays up and the bees can get in and out. That's all I'm really worried about on that. But other than that, you just find a way to keep it pinned up or something. Maybe Gorilla Tape would work. But yeah, looks good. Looks real good. So this is what all the colonies will look like, minus the Lyson one. So that's it. I think that's mostly how I get my colonies ready for winter, how I overwinter my colonies specifically. This video is probably getting a little long in the tooth, so we need to probably go ahead and wrap things up. But, you know, it's worked for me, folks. And I think this is only going to make things better. having the extra insulation on the outside. But being able to feed singles, it's pretty easy to overwinter them. You just really need to micromanage them going into the winter and coming out of the winter. And we'll talk about that later on next year. But how quickly they can build up and be ready to swarm in a single because they run out of room. And it really depends on your area, weather patterns, how the type of bees that you have, how quickly they are to build up, etc. But anyway, I hope you guys found this video helpful. Reach out to me if you have any questions. This has worked well for me for 4 winters going into my 5th. I like it. And I'm always tweaking things a little bit, trying things a little bit differently, but that's the fun of beekeeping, right? At least I think it is. So, what time is it? 2 o'clock. My Colts play in a couple hours, so I'm going to get some more coffee, head in there, and get ready for the game. But thank you very much for watching this. I do hope you found it educational. If you did, please be sure to give it the thumbs up. God bless you and your bees, and I'll see you on the next video.